This Three Beards Media podcast may contain mature themes, and if you're not down with that, we got 3 words for you. Like the podcast. Nailed it!
Good evening, everybody. This is Fall Starts with Chris Shipley and Bill Blank. My name is Chris Shipley, joined as always by Bill Blank. Bill, how are you doing tonight?
I am swell, Chris. It's good to see you in nice, warm accommodations without any bullshit heaters and
right?
all that good stuff.
I know. It's nice to be back in my own little environment instead of that dinky little hotel I was sitting in 2 weeks ago. I made it out alive, though.
There wasn't as much garbage on the walls in that hotel, though. So
I guess okay, it's starting. We're 10 seconds in. We're already starting. We'll get to that later. But, ladies and gentlemen, tonight on the podcast, we have a very special guest joining us. She's an accomplished athlete, Iowa State University community activist, and advocate for women's sports and mental health. We're thrilled to have Lyndsey Fennelly with us tonight to share her insights and experiences. So let's dive right into it. But first, I want to congratulate her and her family on the Big 12 Women's Championship this weekend and continued success in the tournament. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Lyndsey Fennelly. Lyndsey, thanks for coming on Fall Starts with us.
Well, I appreciate it, Chris, and certainly Bill as well. Anybody who's sharing the good message of Iowa sports and we can sprinkle in some, mental health conversations, I'm all for. So what a time for our state. I mean, college hoops across the landscape. Certainly I'm biased to the Cardinal and Gold and the fun that we just had in the last couple of days. My head's still spinning today with unpacking and repacking and, all the sorts, but there's other teams in the state doing that too. And I think it's a testament to the people here that are a part of basketball in general.
Yeah, I would say that the state of Iowa is probably the epicenter of some of the best women's basketball going. All three major teams made the tournament, good seeds. I would say that neither Iowa or Iowa State are happy with their seeding. I would think that they're both underseeded, but that's an whole nother podcast maybe.
Yeah, I think you get to this time of year and you're happy to be in, and fans I think are more at times dug into the overseed underseed. Obviously, when you're close like Iowa State was to being a host. I think it's maybe a little more prevalent, but I'm sure Iowa thought at some point they were going to be a 1 as well. But it's great basketball. There's so many good youth development things, programs that I've been a part of or been able to see. I was texting 3 players on the Drake women's team tonight that I had trained many, many years ago. We're all just getting older, right? So it's just cool to see across the board. Obviously we all have certain teams to pull for, and Bill's got that thing on his shirt right now. It seems to be planted tonight, but I think overall as a whole, you get to this time of year and you probably are rooting for the team that you root against the other 11 and a half months out of the year. And so it's just cool to be a part of. I'm grateful to have a front row seat. And even though I run to the concession stand like 6 times a game in the bathroom twice, it's still one of the best seats in the house.
Well, you know what really I think should be mentioned a lot is the coaching across the board. I don't think there's in women's, in women's college basketball, I don't think there's a state probably in the country with 3 coaches like we have kind of across the board all in the tournament right now. I mean, the coaching's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they're all homegrown too, which is really cool. And so many of the rosters are littered with, great Iowa high school players. And I'm from Los Angeles, so you're sort of just one of the other really big states in this country, right? When you're from California. And it's been really cool for me on a super personal level for 20 years to watch what Iowa basketball has meant for girls, for boys, for the high school level, for the college level, for AAU, for the training, vision that I've had a lot. So yeah, it's really fulfilling. It's fun. And then you got young kids like my 2 kids that see these kids in the gym all the time and they see a version of themselves that they too could be at some point. And so that makes it equally cool and probably the best at the highest level.
100%. Lyndsey, I gave you kind of a overview, gave the viewers and listeners an overview of what of some of your history and background. But why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about who you are and why we brought you on tonight?
Sure. So originally Lyndsey Metters. I came here to Ames in 2003. I was from Los Angeles, California. I fell in love with Iowa State and the fans and playing in the Big 12 Conference and playing for such a passionate coach who I just saw, Marcus Pfizer. I don't know if I'm allowed to say bad words, but
go ahead.
I'll just say he laced
yes,
it.
We say bad words all the time.
He laced it with the a 4-letter word. I got kids in the background probably on their hopefully they're reading right now, not on their devices. But calling my father-in-law the GOAT, which you think of his career and the Division I wins that he has had almost 760 now, and just the amount of players and taking literally Iowa State basketball from nothing to something. And I think the word that I always go back to is just consistency. And I remember I was so enthralled with how he did what he did every single day, regardless of who you were playing, regardless of anything. And so had the chance to play here for 4 years. I was an All-American my last 2 years. I got drafted in the WNBA long enough to tell my kid that so that he'll listen to me when I tell him how to hold his follow through. But not long enough to make a team or any money outside of per diem, really. And then I jumped into training kids. And so I've run a basketball training business that has serviced over 40,000 kids in 15 years. And obviously the last name lends to marrying his son, Billy, who's an assistant and been on staff. And I've had my hand in a lot of entrepreneurial sort of pursuits and opportunities and a very close relationship with George and Yang that sort of catapulted into something I would have never imagined. We've run 7 basketball camps, the 8th coming this summer, a charity golf outing that raises, great money for charities here in Ames. And all along the way, from the outside looking in, I kind of seem to have it all, or I seem to do it all, or I seem to be able to handle anything that was thrown my way. And in 2013, I was diagnosed with an illness. I spent 15 days in a hospital. And from the outside looking in, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. 2013, you're mentally ill, you're deranged, you're violent, you're just in a super dark place that nobody talks about publicly. And so I kind of threw it under the rug. 5 years went by. We had 2 beautiful children. And then it happened again in 2018. And this time it was 21 days. And this time it was kids back home who hadn't seen mom. And this time it was, just the recognition that if I would just accept this and accept the therapy and accept the help and just surrender to being truthful to the things that I was going through, there was actually hope and healing and a positive future on the horizon. And I can unequivocally say almost on my 5-year anniversary, I'm 17 days away from it. I am a better everything because I said I need help, or because I said I'm not perfect. And so in 2018, about 2 months after I got out of the hospital, I just started to kind of informally share my message on social media. And I think people bought into it because, again, from the outside looking in, based on what I had accomplished or who I was or what kind of car you drive, or people, what could make Lyndsey sad, or gosh, she's got it so rough, and I think we saw the Connor McCaffreys of the world. He's a coach's kid, what's wrong with him? And it was almost like your social economic status or your accomplishments starved you of anyone really caring how you were feeling. And I think social media has exacerbated that tenfold for the current college athlete. And so that's kind of a loaded question when you tell me to introduce myself, because I think I got my hand in enough different pots. But certainly grateful for the platform and just being able to talk about it in a way that normalizes it so that people aren't so tied to the stigma of just asking for help, because we're all deserving of it.
Agreed. And I think, especially as probably an athlete in a Division I athlete, a very accomplished Division I athlete, I mean, that's, you're less than 1%. So I think people look at that as having a level of toughness that doesn't go along with mental illness. They figure that these are like the toughest people we know. And was there probably for you some of that embarrassment? Was that a lot of kind of where that came from, being that, you know, you didn't want to seem weak?
Oh, I mean, and I can't tell you the number of people. Again, I go back to like when I first posted about my illness in the middle of 2018, the amount of direct messages and hits that I got on the back end of accomplished, successful, quote unquote, high end, achieving individuals was more than what society told us, which was you were under covers, you were watching TV all day, you didn't have the energy to get out of bed. Like there's plenty of people in all of our communities that are quote unquote sort of up here in their, again, accomplishment, success, bank accounts, whatever you attribute that to, that just don't prioritize themselves because they, you know, I was climbing the professional proverbial ladder in so many different ways that personally I just ignored how I was feeling because I was doing well and I seemed to be happy. And so yeah, I think there's definitely a weak element that is pervasive at all levels of sport. You know, it's the old, well, you don't cry, be tough, get over it. And I found that crying and being more real is just more transparent and truthful. And we're so deserving of it. And I think that's you know, in sports, it's always about the next stat sheet, the next scouting report, the next game, the next anything, that we fail to really live well in the now. And that's what I aspire to do and I strive to do. And this last 5 days, honestly, I was probably horrific at it on many levels. So Chris, this is a well-timed opportunity for me to say all these things out loud to make sure I'm doing it just in the same.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You know, and it's validating. I think that it's a word that gets left out, stories like yours, and for you to tell them, it's validating even for people like me. You know, I've been accused of oversharing. Haven't I, Chris?
Yep. That's okay.
I have
too.
You know, and I've always been open about, you know, my own battles and my own, you know, I always dealt with anxiety on some level. And, you know, as a stand-up comic, that doesn't seem to go together for people. That doesn't make sense to people. And so, you know, hearing your story, it's validating for people like me because I've always wanted to normalize it. I joke about it, you know, I mean, I've at my own expense a lot. And so, you know, like personally, sometimes just there'll be like some dark humor in there, and you can sometimes only share that with people that are on that level. But, you know, I think it's okay. And I think that mental health, there's no one size fits all. I think everybody finds what works for them. What do you think works for you? Like, do you have any type of like daily approach? Like, is there a meditation that you do? Is there anything that you found like that you practice that has really helped you on a daily basis?
Yeah, my non-negotiables. And again, I am not going to pretend to admit that the last 5 days were, you know, the best because you're, you know,
it's competition.
We had a lot going on, and there's a lot of great Cyclone fans that you're running into left and right, and so you're not really.
Read my Twitter about referees someday when you get a chance, and you'll understand my own mental illness.
Okay, I will do that. But you know, my non-negotiable, my number one is sleep. 7 to 8 hours a night. I used to fuel off of 2 to 3 hours a night. When I grew up in Los Angeles, I was obsessed with Kobe Bryant, so I'd hear the stories of him going to the gym at 3 a.m. and that's what I thought you did to be successful. And I got here to Iowa State, and I begged a janitor to get me into Hilton before there was the Sukup basketball training facility, you know, and you were just like, that was all I ever knew was you put in the work. And so sleep, though I've recently, or really the last 5 years, dug into that so I don't mess with my sleep. a lot of that is aided by 3.5 of the pills I take every day. So medication's a part of it. Probably the third one would be exercise. I find that is the one space that I can just dump everything. Some days it's 30 minutes, some days it's an hour, some days it's super intense, other days it's just put the phone on, do not disturb, and go. And so I've tried to, make that, but the phone is a trigger for me. We all deal with it, right? 1 minute you're like, I got to get back to this person right away, or I got to jump onto Twitter and post something. And then the next minute I'm like, there's not much I actually get from anything on my phone. But I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm trying to fill camps, or I'm trying to, do whatever, just engage and have fun with people. And so I just try to have as much balance as I can with that, so it doesn't become an all the time thing. And so those are the non-negotiables. Like I try to stay really focused and content on. And then probably the last one is just the people around me, like are super in tune. Obviously, Billy is very aware of how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. And then there's probably a group of 4 to 6 people that are extremely close to me. I have an assistant, so she really manages a lot of the day-to-day, for our training business, for example. And that was a big step for me because, you're the point guard. You're supposed to put everything on your shoulders. And so, but the people around me are ridiculously supportive and aware and understanding. And everyone knows, just like I have no I have no problem checking in on them with a question that might be uncomfortable, they'll do the same. And so that open dialogue, kind of like you were referring to earlier, Bill, I think is a huge part of the healing process. If I had cancer, I'm sure people would say, hey, how's your chemo treatment going? Most people that know that someone is struggling in some capacity mentally don't go up to Bill and say, well, when was the last time you went to therapy, Bill? And
right.
That'd be seen as like intrusive or
last Monday.
Yeah, I'm tomorrow morning. I don't know a coach's spouse involved in postseason that shouldn't have a therapist this time of year. So I will go on record as saying that, because we all do. We wear so many different hats and responsibilities, and if you don't have safe places to put them, that's when life seems to kind of spiral out of control.
It's funny you say that because I just asked someone recently how their brain was. And they're like, yeah. I've never been asked that before. And I was like, well, it's important. Like, how's your brain?
Yep. I totally get it.
Lyndsey, you talk about the triggers that help you try to manage it. But I noticed today, for example, backstory a little bit. I lost my job in January and, I'm 52 years old. I've never not had a job. It's been 2 months. And I'm finding myself now, Mondays are my day where I have to go in and fill out some paperwork and I look at jobs and things like that. And I woke up this morning, I had a really positive attitude. I had a good day going. And I instantly, after I did all those things, about a half an hour later, all I wanted to do was just go crawl up in a corner and just feel sorry for myself. And I had had a really bad afternoon. And it dawned on me that I think that is a trigger for me right now because I am sad about my situation and I that triggers my feel sorry for me and a little bit of sadness. Do you have some of those types of things that you try to stay away from that maybe trigger some of those feelings and things like that? And how do you cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, besides Bill's shirt, I definitely. I definitely.
That's right. Keep going, Lyndsey. You keep taking jabs all day long with him. It's fine. It's totally fine. I can mute him at any time.
Yeah. I'm speaking tomorrow at Audubon. I don't know how to say it. High school to I believe it's their middle and high school students, and this is something that I will bring up to a group of 400 kids. Is the ability to just be aware of the things that trigger you. So how I describe it to them, or how I will describe it tomorrow in my talk, is I think there are people, places, things that make us uncomfortable for whatever reason. Maybe it's suppressed, maybe it's undealt with, maybe it's the way that someone has made you feel. And so what I've noticed, I don't know if you guys have Apple Watches, but I have an Apple Watch, and it sends you that breathe reminder throughout the day, maybe 4 or 5 times. I remember asking Billy one time, It's like, hey, when was the last time your breathe thing went off? And mine literally goes off like 4 to 5 times a day. You know, your heart rate starts to spike up. And he was like, I actually don't know if that's ever, you know, like happened. It's just a funny sort of dichotomy of our relationship. And, you know, certainly his laid back nature is so warm and welcome in my world. But, you know, I think it's okay to identify those. And the reason I'm sharing this story is there is an individual who is in my life who, when I was around this person, I just started to notice that breathe app or that breathe reminder would go off like crazy. And so as uncomfortable as it is, I've had to build boundaries. I've had to say no, or I've had to say this doesn't serve me or my family, so I don't need this person around. And I think that's certainly uncomfortable. And when you're always the yes person, or when, you know, people ask you for tickets, or people ask you for access to George, or people ask you, you know, all day long, I'm just getting ping, ping, ping. And what I didn't realize until honestly probably the last couple of months was so much of that was just ingrained in, you know, who I was as Lyndsey, or who I am as Lyndsey, is more fostered by how I serve everyone else. It has nothing to do with how I serve me. And so I think, Chris, you know, as I think of what you're going through, it's really digging into like, who makes Chris has nothing to do with what Chris makes. And I'm not just talking about money or the job. And that's homage to me seeing a professional licensed therapist for almost 5 straight years now, every other week, absolutely non-negotiable, and learning to answer the question, who is Lyndsey, without hats, you know, or any of the things that come along with it.
Yeah.
So did you get a therapist yet, Chris? We talked about this 2 weeks ago.
I know. I have not. That's my homework.
God damn it.
I got plenty of time. I'm not sure why not.
You know, and I know these things cost money, and I recognize they're not a sponsor.
That's why we do this.
Okay.
That's
Right.
exactly why we do this.
Yep.
But I do think there's, you know, I think especially if this podcast, you know, has more reaches with rural Iowa and men, is there's so many excuses. And it's, you know, I don't have the money, or I don't have the time, or the therapist I really want to get into is an hour and a half away, and, you know, I can't make that work, and they're not even available for the next, you know, 6 months. Is I've really been encouraging people like the BetterHelps. You know, there are some online telehealth experiences that I know aren't as ideal. I know oftentimes they're more out of pocket versus insurance coverage, but I sat about 2 months ago, a very good friend of mine, of ours, was really, really struggling. And I had coffee with him for 90 minutes. And if I told you who this person was, or what their bank account looked like, or the fact that he's a 42-year-old married man, and he was on the verge of just really, really struggling. And I think a lot of people are there, and we just have to find the healthy outlets and the healthy places to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah, that kind of ties into what Ethan said earlier. He said it's interesting how people assume just because others are successful, that means people aren't battling demons of their own. And we talked a little bit about that in a couple of previous episodes about stigma, and how, you know, that leads into, you don't want people to know that you're not okay and that you're not struggling, because you might have a status or whatever that you need to hold on.
And I hate when we throw the term successful in there when we're talking about mental health, because it's such an irrelevant thing, first of all, but success is also self-defined. I mean, you know, when somebody's saying, well, they're so successful, no, you think they are. Your idea, they're successful according to what your idea of success is, and also what you think they are. You have no idea what their day-to-day life is.
Yeah.
So I always think it's kind of, you know, as a society, we're being irresponsible when we just decide. And I'm not, and what Ethan's saying is true, but that's why I think that happens. I think everybody just has this societal idea of what success is. And to me, you know, I pursued stand-up comedy as a living when I was 21 years old, and all I ever wanted to do was eat. I didn't need to be rich and famous. I just wanted to pay my bills telling jokes. And that was success to me. And I was fine with that. Pandemic hits, divorce, here I am again. So like, it's a roll with it situation, but I think that we're being irresponsible when we throw that term success out there.
No, for sure. And I mean, that's exactly what that's not why I started talking, but I recognized I had a platform in 2018.
Exactly.
And I knew that if I, again, was diagnosed with any other condition, lifelong illness, I would tell everybody about it, because I remembered how alone, how ashamed, how afraid, how embarrassed I felt. And I thought, man, if there are people who deal with this in the dark, and I'm not saying, I'm absolved of future issues or don't deal with things still daily. But I very, very vividly understood that my just acceptance publicly would probably help people say, well, gosh, she kind of seems like she has a lot of good things going for her, but she's still saying she's struggling, to the point of 37 days in a hospital that, you're lying on beds without sheets, and it's plastic. And so every time you move, you can hear it. And the windows, I've never been to jail, knock on wood. But the windows look like a jail cell. And, it wasn't a comfortable environment, but they have to reduce all the stimulus. And I couldn't put on eyeliner because they're afraid you're going to poke yourself. Like, we're not talking about, I mean, just things that had people seen the Lyndsey Fennelly on social media, and then like 2 days later also saw actually where I was or how I was feeling or what I was going through, the dots wouldn't connect. And I think there's so many easy ways to hide and to mask pain, grief, illness, sadness, whether it's through alcohol, whether it's through social media, whether it's, the next job that you're trying to chase on LinkedIn. And I got honestly kind of sick of living a lie. And I knew I had to have people around me that would support the notion that I was worthy of feeling as best I could, no matter what that took and no matter how public that actually probably was going to be.
Lyndsey, I know you said you had about 30 minutes. Do you have time to stick around for a little bit longer? I'd like to dive in to just some questions about after you decided to be more public about it, how your family supported you and things like that. Yeah,
Billy just got the kids ice cream, so they probably don't even know I'm in the house.
Great. All right, we're gonna take a quick break from our first sponsor, Revelton Distilling Company in Osceola, Iowa, and then we'll come back with Lyndsey Fennelly.
At Revelton Distilling Company, everyone has become a part of the Revelton family. From the Taylors and their daughter who helped perfect their award-winning gins, to the team who installed Lucy, our 33-foot-tall custom-made still, right down to the local farms that provide our coveted corn, and even the cows on those farms who consume our mash byproduct. Want to see the farm to flask come to life? Now you can tour Lucy and find out where we take Iowa's harvest and transform it into our finest spirits. Choose between a 45-minute tour or find out even more by scheduling a VIP behind-the-scenes tour to get the taste of the full Revelton experience. You can visit them at 1400 West Clay Street in Osceola, Iowa, or find all of Revelton's award-winning spirits at any local grocery or spirits retailer.
All right. Thank you, Revelton Distilling Company. By the way, Three Beards Media is sponsoring a bracket challenge for both the men's and the women's bracket. You can win a Revelton Distilling and Brown Dogs Farms swag gift set. So be sure to check out all our social media. You can sign up there. Newsflash, I do have the Lady Cyclones going at least into the Sweet 16. So
Hawks by a million, both brackets.
My thing's breaking up. No, like I said in the beginning, I think it's phenomenal for our state. And obviously, you're looking at, again, I've been a part of Iowa basketball for 20 years, and you've got Ashley Jones and Caitlin Clark doing what they're doing for their teams on an individual, but also team level. It's remarkable. And so
It's transcendent. I mean, that's, as a, an advocate for women's sports in general. I mean, I would think this is thrilling right now. Carver Hawkeye Arena is selling out for women's basketball games every day. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a quick story. So Brian Jones, Ashley Jones' dad, actually was texting me, and I've got a pretty good relationship with a lot of the parents. Sometimes it's in passing, sometimes some of them work for me. And Brian sent me a text today, and I always joke with him. I say, hey man, you're probably gonna have all 5 of your daughters play Division I sports. Like, can Callie, my 5-year-old, can she be number 6? Like, what is that going to take? What do I got to pay you? Sort of joking. And so over the years, he's always told me, he's like, just put a ball in her hand. Even if you're just sitting in the living room, throw the ball back and forth, right? And so he's kind of, over the years, just said different things. And he texted me totally out of the blue today. And he said something to the effect of, make sure you take Callie to the gym today, because I would imagine her inspiration is as high as could be after watching the last few days. And, I think that's the guys or the guide that I and Billy follow. Obviously the current players are remarkable, but you want to provide these kids with an opportunity to see a vision of themselves that they wouldn't have thought possible without, these players and teams doing what they're doing. And Ashley actually walked into a camp today that I was hosting this morning. And you literally would have thought like Mickey Mouse walked in the building. So that was pretty, didn't even know she was coming. So that was pretty cool too.
That's awesome. So before the break, you were talking a little bit about telling your story and how important that was and so on. I'm curious as to how, I think I'm already going to know the answer here, but how supportive was Billy and your family, with them being such high profile with you telling your story and being open about it?
I will be honest, like in 2013, it was during the middle of the basketball season. And I think actually Billy and the team were on a bus to Kansas when things were starting to unravel. And I got to the emergency room here in Ames. And we just didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. Certainly he didn't, his parents. And so while, we were trusting of the care I was getting at the time, it was super like, all right, well, we'll do whatever. And he visited me every day. And I always remembered I faintly could actually see him. But I always remembered I could smell him. I could touch him. I knew he was there and I needed that. But it wasn't like over the top, like, all right, we're going to do anything. We're going to dig in. I told him, I was like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not going to therapy. I'm not going to take medication. This stuff isn't real. Like, I'm an athlete and medication's for wussies and we're moving on. And he was like, okay, and we just sort of moved along. It happens almost the exact same thing in 2018, but this time it's out of season. This time I was actually in California when it happened. The significance of everything that I was feeling and going through was higher. And most importantly, we have 2 children at home. And so I think that changed certainly the desire to say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do it for real this time. And I needed somebody like that. And so he was so supportive, came all 37 days during both times. But he's so good at knowing people and knowing me that he also knew what I needed every step of the way. So some days it's a pat on the back. Other days it's an ear to listen. Other days it's you've been on your phone for 7 straight hours and haven't taken a break or haven't worked out yet or haven't showered or haven't, so he's a great reminder and sort of coach in that way. And then my in-laws have been tremendous. They moved in with Billy to help with the kids during that time. And it's been a no questions asked. You tell me what you need. There's certain members of his family that are some of my best advocates. And so, yeah, it's probably a little bit more unique in the sense of it is a little more publicly seen or understood or known, but none of that stuff matters to them. There's never been one time where coach is like, hey, tone down on the mental health posts. We're trying to recruit kids right now. Right. I'd like to say in a way, I think I connect better with people who are going through stuff. So yeah, if you don't think I've got, every player's number and they know it's an open door anytime, there's that too. So it's the ugliest and most beautiful journey I've ever been on.
That's a great way to put it. That's an absolute. Well, look at 2013. You didn't know anything. It was, we're gonna do this. I mean, but even 2013, even though you didn't know anything then, think about the advancements before, that took place before that, to where, I mean, you weren't in there getting a hole drilled in your head or something, which would have happened maybe even 30 years before that. I mean, there could have been any number of, so it's like a slow burn, but it does feel like it's getting better and better. And I think you're a huge part of that. But what I wanted to ask was, you mentioned going to therapy the last 5 years. I actually have been going to therapy since I was a kid. I started going through anxiety stuff in junior high. And my mom started taking me. So I've always had some kind of hand in it. It wasn't, I was always okay with it, but you had your breakdowns later on in life, but through therapy, have you found things in childhood that kind of planted some seeds? And you don't necessarily have to give any details or stories if you don't want to, but anything back, that you were able to go way back and identify that contributed way all that time later.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think suppressed childhood anger, frustration, sadness, abuse, trauma probably exists in all of us. And I didn't ever go there. A couple years into therapy, like my therapist, the one thing she would probably tell you is that I work really hard. Like I don't just go in there and, oh yeah, we're going to the NCAA tournament. Oh my gosh, life is great. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with some ugly stuff right now. And so it's been really validating to bring up feelings that go back as long and deep as when I was first born. But I also, I think there is that balance of, okay, that's what I do in therapy, but then how do we have a great day, or how do we not let it totally drag you down? And that's where I think there is an element of sort of, how does mental toughness, mental illness, and mental health all work together in ways to
keep you productive,
to allow you to, allow you to handle things, but not, just go down that spiral where you're reverting back to every memory or every thing that went good or bad, in your life. And I will share this one story with Will a couple of years ago. He's our 8-year-old. We used to do we sometimes still do it, not as frequent, but a favorite part of your day, right? We sit down, what's the favorite part of your day? And a couple of years into it, he said, hey, can we do my worst part of the day? And I remember Billy and I looked at each other like, no, like we're a blue ribbon, top of the podium, like trophy, family. And yet it was this beautiful moment where our son was basically saying, I also want to be able to dump ugly stuff. And obviously he didn't say that, but he did say, right, can we all do a worse? And I think that's the ownership we're trying to take as parents of course we want them to be successful. Of course we want to acknowledge the highs and celebrate those. We also have to make home just a safe place to say, I didn't have a great day, or I'm really struggling with this, or this person made me feel uncomfortable, in some type of way. So, yeah, I mean, I think those things all come up when you do dig in and you do the hard work. Like how you feel does seem to be more connected to probably childhood, or just anything that has been suppressed in any way.
That's a great point. That thing about Will, because there are times where I'll be sitting at the dinner table and my wife, who's a teacher, says the same thing all the time. Tell me something good about today. Tell me something good about today. And eventually, at some point, one of the kids will want to talk about something negative, and I have sometimes said, why do we have to talk about something negative? Like why do we have to bring the conversation down? We're having a good conversation. Hearing that the way you just explained it, of just being open to allowing somebody to talk about the worst part of their day to help them get off the chest, kind of opens my eyes a little bit about allowing that and understanding why that needs to be done.
Let them drink the haterade a little bit, Chris.
Right? I think part of it for me, though, is I grew up in a family that was so negative. they wallowed in negativity. That's all they ever talked about. And that's all they ever focused about. So in my relationship that I have with my wife and the family that I have, I've tried to turn that around and be more positive and so on. I need to realize that there's a healthy balance there too.
For sure. And I think balance is such a key word to, in all this. I mean, we're all going to have great days, and you're going to ride the highs of yesterday. And then you're going to have days that aren't perfect. And I think it's that perfectionism that I or a lot of people struggle with, especially with social media. And that's where, I'd be remiss not to say, I think it is so important that if anyone's listening to this or hears something that triggers them in a way that does make them feel uncomfortable or ashamed or afraid, that seeking professional help is hands down the most important thing to do. I do not proclaim to be an expert. I'm simply an experiencer who, if I could have a diploma hanging up behind me that said, like, been through a lot of shit, contact here, with no actual like formal seal. That's certainly where I come from.
I think if you relate it though to a physical aspect of your body as well, Bill and I have talked about this before, in that I went through cancer almost 6 years ago. I'm not hesitant that if people come up to me and say, hey, can I talk to you about, chemo or this treatment or whatever, nobody thinks twice about coming up to ask me about that for my advice or what I think. They're not asking me because they think I can prescribe them some sort of a chemo regimen or whatever. They're just asking me for my experience. And I think that's the kind of the same way is it's okay. That's right. She's already classed it up way more than Bill ever did. So, but I think that that's okay for people to come and ask, people that have gone through things that you have gone through too, right? We're not asking you for a medical opinion. We're asking you for how you went through things and how you process it and things like that for advice. Yeah.
And I think there's so many, people would always tell me, okay, if there's something looking back that you could have done differently, or how could you have, stopped it? Or how would you, again, 21 days in the hospital in 2018 with 2 young children, there was nothing about that was comfortable. And I think that's the other thing is people will get to a place where they need help or they're trying to seek help, but then we come up with those excuses of why they don't want to leave their comfort zone: money, schedule, time, location. And that's the one benefit I had to the experience I had both times in the hospital, was it was ridiculously inconvenient. And so, experiencing that definitely gave me the insight to say, all right, well, if this is what I have to do to prove to myself that I'm worth more than 2 to 3 hours of sleep, or 30 minutes to myself at certain points throughout the day, like, it almost had to be inconvenient for it to transition itself as much as it did.
I find myself too, somebody just mentioned, like, it doesn't make you weak to ask for help. Of course, it's one of the bravest things you can do. 100% agreed. And like we talked about that toughness and things earlier. And like I just asked Chris about getting a therapist, and God damn it, when you didn't, like, all of a sudden I feel like a coach, and I'm just going, you fucking pussy, go get a therapist. Sorry, I hope your kids didn't hear that or something.
I got it.
Okay, good.
That's the Iowa Hawkeye in him. He doesn't have any. Doesn't really have any class. Well, Lyndsey, we really appreciate you coming on. I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about George's camp that's coming up, and anything else that you might have coming up that if you'd like to plug, and then go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think George, a lot of people don't know this, but the first person besides the family that was visiting every day in the hospital that I had told about my specific condition, my experience in 2018 was George. We've done this camp and this golf outing. Both have been wildly, I don't know if popular is the right word, influential, impactful. Just a really couple fun days to bring him back. He worked for me. This was pre-NIL days. He worked for me $10 an hour. George Niang was helping me at basketball camps. And we just developed this fast friendship. And, so I ran his first camp 7 years ago. That was really, it was just a hit. Like pre-NIL, here's a guy who just loves Iowa State, still does. He FaceTimed me at midnight last night to try and connect. He's tried to call Billy like 7 times today. So like he genuinely loves Iowa State. He loves the women's program as much as the men's. Like, he's a great guy. So the basketball camp was super cool. Still is. We have it. We're doing a couple hours in Des Moines, and then we're going to do 6 hours in Ames. So for 9 hours, he'll be standing on court, not with his phone, milling around, high-fiving kids. He's so good at that. And then a day later, we'll do our golf outing. This year, the charity is Child Serve. Last year, I think we raised around $130,000 in one day with the golf outing. That went to the Boys and Girls Club of Ames. So we just early on kind of hit it off and recognized that sort of his face and me behind the scenes seemed to make good stuff happen for a lot of folks around here. And so I do think the golf outing is completely sold out. It's sold out within about 72 hours, which is insane. But we do a trivia experience the night before, so that'll be fun. But no real other plugs other than, I run a ton of camps and training year round. And, I think the only other last plug I'd say is just reminding people that you are enough, and that you are enough can end right there. And it doesn't need to come with how many Twitter followers you have or how many people listen to the podcast or what job you have or anything personally. You are enough is enough. And I hope everyone remembers that as much as they can.
Perfect.
Thank you, Lyndsey.
Yeah, this is where I will also chime in that our sister podcast, Side of the Storm, with Marcus Pfizer, who hopped in earlier, and Brent Curvey, and then George Trice. Anytime you want to come on and talk just women's basketball or basketball in general or sports, I'm sure they'd love to have you, and they'd love to have George as well. So you guys can come on at some point and plug that your events as well. So
okay, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, all right, we're going to take one more break. We're going to let Lyndsey get to her family, and then Bill and I will wrap up. All right. Thanks, Lyndsey.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Brown Dogs Farm are Norwalk, Iowa-made hot sauces and dressings. Brown Dogs Farm was born out of the dream to emulate the simple life of Rob's grandparents, who inspired him with their hard work and abundant gardens. Rob and Amanda set out to create a unique blend of fruit and pepper that would satisfy the part of the brain that craves great flavor without sacrificing the spice of the peppers. Sweet, but still packing heat. With combinations like jalapeno green apple, habanero peach, cherry rhubarb reaper, and other great flavor combinations, there is a spice and flavor that is right for any party or get-together. BDF also has homemade versions of their classic and spicy ranch that are one of a kind. You can order all of those and more online at www.browndogsfarm.com and ask your local grocery to stock up.
And we're back. Bill, what a great conversation with Lyndsey.
Yeah, that was amazing. I'm really happy she came on. How'd you make that happen? Did you just hit her up on Twitter like a creep?
Yeah. I creeped on her, and I think that's
well, good for her.
She's pretty open about it. So, and right, I know that was good. So, I forgot to tell her that through third party people, I have two pieces that I go in here. So that's all another story.
You just Wayne's World drive-through windowed that whole thing. I heard nothing.
Yeah. I said it. I have a couple pieces of Hilton Coliseum that are now side tables in my basement down here. At one point, were in her possession at one point earlier this year.
Oh, really?
I won't divulge how I got them, but they're all by legal means. I'll just say that.
What a crock of shit. There's some kind of
I'm sure people are lining up.
Mafia Iowa State memorabilia group of people knocked off a cigarette truck or some shit.
I'm sure there's a large portion of Carver where people sit and knit all the time that you can get your hands on.
Oh, you son of a bitch. You know, I'm telling you right now, it does. If Carver was a half hour away from Des Moines, it would be a lot better atmosphere during the week for basketball.
I agree. I
can say that's not a real thing. I think is bullshit. You know what I mean?
But at one point they were packing that place. So I mean, I can remember.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. But like, you just look at different times of just kind of in the world. You know,
right?
Like, I mean,
I don't even know.
We were looking at top 5 teams a lot.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. In the Tom Davis era, I mean, you guys had talent, and it was crazy good. I think it's not necessarily. I think it has something to do with distance. I think it's more. You guys are playing games on Wednesday nights at 8:00,
right?
And then you add that towards the distance, and then Sundays,
right?
You know those are just not prime times to go when you got to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours.
But if it's a half hour, you'll go to an 8:00 game,
right? Yeah, if it's a good game, yeah, I think so too. Yep,
a decent enough game or whatever.
Got your bracket filled out, Bill?
I don't. I always wait for the play-in games to get over.
I never do. I don't know why, because I guess it's never going to go that far into it that it bothers me. But
for the first round though, like now, the play-in games. It used to be they just played the number 1 seed. I mean, so it didn't matter. But now they have that 11 game.
Yeah.
Two of them play the 11, whatever that is.
Yeah, I know Iowa State plays the winner of one of those games.
Yeah. Those are interesting games. Those that play-in teams winning those games here on occasion. I think I would even venture to say once a year a play-in team wins that game at least.
I think they do. I think that's what they were saying the other day, yesterday after they came out, that it wasn't a great draw for Iowa State because every year since they've done that, one of those teams has won that opening round, that second round game for them and advance. So, yeah, I would imagine they probably got a game under their belt. They got some kinks worked out, and they're in a flow. So, should be a fun tournament.
So, what do you think? Obviously, like there's you can't just speculate, but like the whole Caleb Grill situation. Not that was necessarily addition by subtraction, but he seemed to kind of allude to the fact that he was going through some mental health issues or whatever. Yeah. Have there been any more details on that? Has he said anything else?
No details have been released that I've seen for that. Just reading the tea leaves from the team and what they've said. Jaron Holmes at one point, I think, said he feels like this team is coming together again. So I think that there was probably some fracture in the locker room there. There was probably some tension. And I think that those guys seem to be gelling and coming back together to where they were. And I think you can kind of pinpoint when that all happened with him. Now, the last time we recorded was that Monday night where he got a technical. Caleb got a technical and lost his mind. And then next thing you know, he was sitting on the end of the bench. And I got a text message from Marcus who said, look at that. He's on the end of the bench. Something's up. Something's not right. And I just kind of blew it off. I was like, Marcus, you're fucking crazy. And then when
Marcus Pfizer?
Yeah.
Like he doesn't know. Like he's not going to know. Yeah. Yeah. You go ahead, Chris. Go ahead and blow off the guy that played in the NBA when he's talking about.
I know, right?
Some fucking actual basketball.
What do I know?
Actually doing something.
Oh that's why I don't. That's right. I did. I kind of blew him off. I was like, Marcus, you're looking for shit.
He played for Larry Eustace. I know. Tell when something's wrong.
So when he announced that he was leaving or whatever, I got a receipts text of basically going, see, I told you guys something was up. I told you something was up. I told you the other night. So, but you could kind of see it in the Texas game when he got, he was kind of getting on the Texas benches, and talking some shit and then the haircut and then all these, he was getting a little more aggressive and technical fouls and things like that. So
Did he kind of going Rodman? Was there like some? Did it seem like there's some? I'm like from hearing you describe it, it feels Dennis Rodman-y.
I think he was a little over aggressive, and I don't know if that was just because maybe he was overcompensating on the court, or he was trying to work through some things. I don't know. I know at this point, I hope that the kid, gets the help that he needs. He lands on his feet. I'd love to see him go to another team and be successful. Especially after seeing what he wrote and how much he loved Iowa State, and he grew up wanting to be there.
Yeah, he could have went out dropping bombs on people.
Right.
He was very
and took responsibility
Yeah.
for what he had done, and I
whatever
admire
that
him for
was,
that.
right?
Whatever that
Nobody
was,
even
right?
knows.
Honestly, it had to be. I would think it had to be pretty bad because
it's obviously something said in the locker room in the heat of an argument or something.
He followed TJ around quite a bit. He followed him to UNLV, followed him back here. He's been pretty loyal to him. They've been pretty close. So, I've not seen anything official.
Could it have been one of those things where it was like this was the guy, like he was like the Caleb Grill whisperer or something this whole time, and maybe kind of was sick of holding his hand finally at one point,
or maybe he had just gotten to the point where he couldn't do anymore.
Yeah, he just couldn't. Yeah,
you relate it back to Hoiberg and Royce White, right?
Yeah.
Hoiberg was the only one that could kind of keep Royce White in check. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And got him focused and helped him. And maybe at that point, TJ was just like, I've done all I can do here. At some point you've crossed a line, whatever that line was. So,
yeah, it's unfortunate, but I guess they're playing better, which, at least, I didn't even pay attention. I know they beat Baylor again, right?
They did. They beat them 3 times in a row, and they had Kansas. They kind of let Kansas slip in that semifinal. And again, this just shows you what I know compared to an NBA player. I was like, I'd be all right if they lost in the Big 12 tournament, and then they could.
So they're not tired,
right? And Marcus on the podcast last week was like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
You win every goddamn
right.
game.
He's like, "That's dumb as hell." He said,
"Yeah, you win every game you play.
Right?
You want to win every single game."
No kidding.
Yeah, it's just hard when it, as a fan, when shit's predictable, when bad shit is predictable, it just annoys you on such a new level. Like with Iowa, the Big Ten tournament, I saw this coming a mile away. Absolutely saw it from a mile away. I actually wasn't even the least bit surprised in losing to Nebraska. It just seems like we don't ever get that one game that you just have to win to get to a certain point.
Yeah.
Like you just never get that one. It's just like, eh.
And this year for them, it seems like they're all the way up top here. They could run anybody off the court.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're losing to teams like Eastern Illinois and Wisconsin or Nebraska and then Ohio State in the tournament. I mean, who knows? They could go out and totally wax the floor with Auburn in that opening round game.
Which I think we got hosed on.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, you might as well be playing in their backyard.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell is that? How are you the higher seed and then the other team's at home, basically?
Yeah.
Could have played in Des Moines. Why isn't this game in Des Moines?
Right.
8-9. I mean, why not?
Yeah, that's.
But maybe what'll work in our favor is I did hear there's a whole bunch of Alabama fans that are going to show up and
buy tickets and go and then just root against Auburn.
Yeah. They hate each other that
as much. They all are down there going, "Where's Ohio at?"
Yeah,
they don't know the difference between Iowa and Ohio.
Does Iowa got a tree on campus we can kill or something like that?
Do they marry their cousins up there? I love you, Alabama. The Gulf Shores is all right. The rest of it's a complete dirt hole.
Yeah. I've been to Dauphin Island, and that's basically Gulf Shores. It's the cheaper version.
We went
the cheaper and less traveled version of.
We went in the middle of the pandemic. We strapped on some masks and went to the Gulf Coast and to the Gulf Coast, right on the tip over there where Fort Morgan was and things like that, and stayed in a little condo for a week. It was nice. So we self-isolated in our condo and on a beach. That's what we did for that vacation.
Well, that's not horrible. It's not a horrible decision.
No, it was all right.
So Chris, how's your brain? How's your brain this week?
You know what? I did have that epiphany today. I've kind of went. This job thing really has me in a funk. There are days where I feel like I've done everything I can, and I walk out of an interview and I think that went amazing, and then I don't hear anything for 3 or 4 days, and then I start to put myself in a funk again. And I don't know if it's just because I'm more concerned that I'm not good enough and people are not gonna find me like capable enough, employable, or am I just being realistic in that I'm worried about my financial future? I'm not sure which it is.
I think probably the latter more than anything. I mean, if I had to make a guess, after a while, that pressure starts to get to you. I mean, you're trying to provide. Right. There's nothing. There'd be something wrong with you if you didn't feel some pressure and, right. Be, some anxiety. But
today was, I literally woke up, I did my daily podcast today, and I was like, it's going to be a good week. I feel positive that something positive is going to break on my way this week. I've got a second interview that I had a week and a half ago, and they said they were going to let me know at the beginning of this week. So, I've got that little bit of anxiety waiting for that. I had a couple really good interviews at the end of last week, but, I have to still, I have to fill out my unemployment, and I have to, check off certain boxes for that. And I'm sitting here after I got done with my daily podcast. I went to the gym. I had a great workout. I had a good breakfast. I come down here. I start doing that work. And within a half an hour after I've done it all, I was like, I feel like total shit about myself. I can't believe I'm in this position. I should have never left that job that I had 2 years ago. What happens if I'm, maybe I'm 52 years old and, I'm going to end up being back where I was 10 years ago, making, a lot less. And it's not so much the money. It's the fact that I've grown accustomed to be able to do certain things that I enjoy with my wife and be able to take a weekend here or whatever. And I feel like a failure if I have to go backwards, and I shouldn't be in that position, and I'm angry at myself. So then I start to get and then I get quiet, and then it's a whole roller coaster. Then I'm sitting there this afternoon and Stacy's having a conversation with me, innocent enough, and I feel like maybe I'm on edge, or I might snap at her about something, or I'm not giving her the full attention that I should be giving her. You know what I mean? Because it's not her fault. Mm-hmm. So it's just and I even tweeted out today and said, I don't know how I can go from feeling super great and happy this morning to this afternoon I feel like at my lowest. Like, how do I manage that?
Yes, it's definitely a roller coaster. Have you ever tried? Hear me out on this.
I'm listening.
So next time you get that whole morning routine done, right? And you feel really good, and you feel the weird start to creep in, like the dread start to creep in. Try jerking off right then. Right in that moment.
Opposed to the other times that I do it?
Yeah, I think you should try it then. I think you will find that all of a sudden those endorphins flow. I mean, yeah, you got to time it properly. You got to do it right when the dread starts.
Okay. Is that my homework?
I think you should try it.
Okay, that's my homework.
So, the opening of our next podcast is like, hey, Chris, did you jerk off last time you started feeling shitty? Here's what you got to be careful of, though. You got that Catholic upbringing, so I don't want you to feel ashamed after you get done jerking off.
Well, luckily, there's a lot of Lenten confessions going on, and
go.
one of my my Lent promises was I was going to go to reconciliation a lot more. So I'll have something to talk about.
Yeah, you just reconcile. Just tell him, like, look, Father, forgive me, Father. I jerked off when I felt bad about myself. How many Hail Marys? How many Hail Marys do I need to reconcile?
Oh my God!
And I gotta tell you, Father, it worked, and this is gonna become a general practice for me. So just buckle up.
Can I get a long dispensation, like reconciliation, that'll last me for the next few months?
Is there like? If I hold a rosary in my offhand.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm so going to hell.
You already were.
I don't need a speed bullet train right to hell. I just as soon take the scenic route.
You're already taking the scenic route. You made it to 52.
That's right. I'll sit in the purgatory for a while now.
Hey, my advice: next time you're in purgatory, you just jerk off, and then you'll find yourself one end or the other.
All right, good deal. I got to put the explicit on this particular episode. That's fine.
Isn't it always?
It is. It is always. That was my lame attempt at humor. You see, I'm not here.
I thought there was like a thing. I thought all of a sudden.
No, it's an automatic. I just clicked that button automatically.
Yeah. So there we go. The last 2 weeks, my advice. We just had Lyndsey Fennelly on with all this great insight to all this stuff, and at the end of the day, I'm telling you, when you start to feel shitty, jerk off and eat shrooms, and everything's gonna be okay.
That sounds great. And with that,
that's what I tell my therapist.
And with that, we will close this out. Everybody have a good night. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. If it's not a 5-star, keep that shit to yourself. I'll take that from Hot Mess Happy Hour girls. That's their sign off. Go Cyclones, go Hawks.
Just go Hawks.
Okay. All right, now we're out of here.